this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there, as long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, Batons, and things to episode 131 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jarman, and we're on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Jim Henson and Gene Roddenberry.
What started as reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek the original series has expanded into outer space.
Space. And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode, The Lost Treasure of the Fraggles, and the Next Generation episode, Elementary, Dear Data. But before we get to that, Steve, I want to rock.
All right. This is That Rocks. There are all kinds of gems, geodes, and jewels in the world, many of which can be found deep in Fraggle Rock, maybe even anatase.
Ooh.
It's a form of titanium dioxide, which typically forms small, thin crystal structures. It ranges in colors from yellows to browns to blues, depending on what impurities are mixed in with it. And it's a pretty soft gem. So it doesn't really do well in jewelry, and it's more likely to be found in like a collection or on display. Gem quality of this type are specifically very, very rare. So because of that, the kind of cast-off stuff is used in things like pigments and coatings and colorings for things, and it's most commonly used in the production of solar cells.
Oh, I can see that. I'm looking at pictures of it now. It's got that kind of silvery look to it.
That amber kind of look, yeah. So that's anatase and That Rocks.
Yeah.
I want to rock! Nope.
By the way, I encourage people to look at pictures of these things when we mention them because they're really beautiful. This thing's like it's from space. Like it looks really cool.
Yeah.
I never heard of anatase before. That's neat.
Well, this week down in Fraggle Rock, we'll start with What's Up, Doc? Doc went onto a rummage sale and got himself a trunk, and he also bought Sprocket roller skates. He has to try to pick the lock to get in as Sprocket causes just havoc throughout the workshop on his skates. Sprocket loses patience and tries to break the lock with a hammer, but then Doc grabs a jackhammer, and just as Sprocket does a handstand on his roller skates, he breaks the lock with his skate. The treasure inside is revealed. It's the key to the chest that they needed, which is now presumably broken anyway.
What a mind job right there.
But what's going down in Fraggle Rock? Gobo tells Red she should go to get the postcard this trip, and because they show up in time to watch the beast Sprocket skate around like a mad person. Gobo grabs the postcard and makes a run for it, but a flying roller skate carries him and Red away in a flash. They end up crashing into a wall and uncovering a strange cave, inside of which they find a treasure map to the treasure of the rock. They return to Fraggle Rock, but Red doesn't want to tell anyone about the map. Gobo reads Uncle Traveling's map card as a distraction, which we'll talk about later. Gobo and Red go searching for the treasure without the others, but they plan to share the 1,000,000 diamonds with everyone else. They venture deeper and deeper into the rock, and they find themselves in a tunnel leading to the Gorg's garden, where their next clue leads. Junior Gorg is gardening, and Mommy brings him a peach pie with garlic. Yum. But the pie just simply it bounces. It's got a spring to it, and he can't cut into it, so it gets tossed aside for plot later. Gobo and Red realize the treasure leads into the Gorg's castle, and they get the heck out of there, and they decide they have to get the others for help. Back at the rock, the others are performing a jazzy number on flute, drums, and washboard when Red and Gobo interrupt and barge in and take them back to the Gorg's garden. The Gorgs are tucking in for the night as Junior goes on the night watch. The Fraggles use the pie loaded earlier to bounce up on top of a door and get inside the castle while Junior snoozes nearby. Boober gets left behind while the others continue on without him. They find a loose stone in the wall, and behind it they find the treasure. The excitement wakes the Gorgs, and the Fraggles nearly escape. They open up the chest and find inside a music box covered with 1,000,000 diamonds that each pluck a sweet chord in an ancient tune which draws Fraggles from their beds. They all sing together, and they share with each other, and they learn that the real magic and treasure of the Fraggles was the song they all sing together. And Red decides maybe they didn't need diamonds after all. So, Jarman, what did you think of this week's episode of Fraggle Rock?
I wish you guys could see Steve's face when he's saying this, because he's just like, yes, maybe they didn't need it after all. He looks like, oh, yeah, it's very pleasant.
Yeah.
But I like this episode a lot. Also, just making my own headcanon now is that these Fraggles are these very strong, powerful fey creatures that they're not aware of their power, but like, especially now they have this music box, they're like imbued with this like deep magic from the rock, and that if anyone were to actually kill a Fraggle, like a human, they would be cursed forever or something, you know, like it just makes this mythos a little bigger.
Well, and also that, like, why was the treasure hidden in the Gorg's garden?
Mm-hmm.
Who was protecting it? And what were they protecting it from?
And how did the Gorgs get it? Why is it in their palace? Like, it's all these mysteries. I want like a dark reboot of the Fraggles, like, to see how this has come true.
I think we can put together some sort of fan fiction on this.
It'll come out turning like Leprechaun. It'll be terrible.
Yeah.
I love the quote Red says to go into the Gorg garden. She goes, "Let's go, Captain Courage." And he says, "After you, Major Disaster," which I thought was a cute line. The one thing with the Gorg mom and dad are telling Junior to stand watch for the night, and they're definitely about to go have sex. The way they're talking.
Yeah.
Mom's like, "Come on, cutie, let's go to bed." He's like, "Oh, I'll meet you there, sweetheart." It's like, oh boy.
And the question is Junior on watch every night? Does he ever have a night off?
Poor guy. Or is it his turn maybe? But at least they know he sleeps. They don't care. They're like, just snore less this time when you do it. But it was just a very cute conclusion that, of course, the Fraggles would have a music box as their biggest treasure. They love singing and playing music. And the Doc and Sprocket scenes were really cute with the box. I'm loving Doc more and more. He's just so lovable and he's so sweet.
And they got a lot of play this episode.
They did.
There are other episodes where you only get like the opening check-in and the end check-in. And this time we got, I think, 3 or 4.
Probably because it was like directly connected to like a treasure box and then like a chest. It kind of made sense to come back to him. But yeah, I thought this is probably one of my top episodes for me actually so far. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. It had a lot of really good tenets. The only thing that was really kind of missing was Trash Heap.
I didn't mention that. Yeah, Trash Heap. Yeah.
But otherwise, I like that it started as small and greedy, and they realized they need their friend's help and like expanded their circle. And then they realized the treasure belonged to everyone, and they expanded the circle again. Like that's just good, clean storytelling.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that part.
That you just see in classic pieces of literature. And what proves that it's a comedy, because at the end of a comedy, the family's bigger. That's always the joke.
A wedding happens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love the Gorgs. I love the peach pie. I like what a setup that was. Mm-hmm. For them to get up on top of the wall later. But no, overall, I would say a pretty darn high episode.
They didn't have like a straight up song, which is different.
No, they had the one musical number with like the wash tub and stuff when just the instruments. And then at the end, there were no lyrics either.
They just kind of hummed along or like made noises, but they weren't like actually saying words. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I guess that's a smart way to do it. Have someone write a tune, but then not have to worry about lyrics for it.
Hey, we don't have time to lyrics. That's fine. They'll hum it or something.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Just go, la, la, la.
Don't worry about it. So good episode.
Absolutely. But what were those silly creatures up to this week? Well, Uncle Traveling Matt discovered what looks like a large Fraggle hole, a wet pond where the silly creatures throw metal discs in. Well, Uncle Traveling Matt's been collecting these discs. They're called coins. So he decides them all to throw them all into what ends up being a fountain. Well, the oldest public fountains were discovered in Samaria and date back to 700 BC, but they weren't really decorative. They were just initially big stone basins that they kept drinking water in for the community. It wasn't until we got to ancient Greece when they made the aqueducts and gravity-based water systems were developed that fountains were typically used as the end point of these large runs of water for whatever made it to the end. And then at the height in like ancient Rome, after the Roman came and took over, there were 39 fountains and 600 public wash basins throughout Rome at its height. And after the fall of the Roman Empire and then the Middle Ages, many of the aqueducts kind of fell into disrepair and crumbled. They just stopped taking care of the water system. So most of the fountains stopped working, and so they became more artistic points and locations for a long time. But then a guy named Pope Nicholas V he commissioned during the height of like the Holy Roman Empire, like once the Vatican took over, commissioned that from a bunch of ancient text be interpreted, and from there they found updated and fixed plans for the original aqueducts, and so he ordered all of them rebuilt. And a bunch of popes took time to rebuild the aqueducts.
Wow. And
rebuild all of these fountains.
It's so weird that we backtracked as a civilization. Like we went from technology that was so ahead of its time, and then just kind of, whoops, it's the Dark Ages.
And then
Fuck it.
as Catholicism and Christianity in general swept Europe, then these elaborate fountains kind of went with it.
Yeah. Built it all back up. And you have like the Trevi fountain and stuff like that, where I was wondering when it would change from like, these are being used for a utilitarian purpose for people to drink or wash themselves, to then just being like, oh, it's just pretty. Don't put your feet in there. It was really
in the Pope Nicholas V era when they came back.
I just find it amazing that you can learn this kind of stuff on a Muppets Fraggles Star Trek podcast.
I'm really digging all the different places I'm getting to go.
Yeah.
We're learning about different rocks. We're learning about pigs and fountains and kites.
Thanks, Traveling Matt.
Man, that crazy bastard. So, Jarman, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
I have to go with the Fraggles skating through the corridors in Fraggle Rock. There were a lot of good moments, a lot of cool looking things. I don't know how they did exactly, but that one just kind of stood out for me because good camera work. They had to use mixed green screen with moving Fraggles. And Red and Gobo just being totally terrified in that one little skate and kind of going through the corridors and ending up in this place, all the spiders. It was just a really cool scene for a 23-minute show on whatever network this was on.
Yeah. I'm in a similar vein, also involving roller skates. I'm going to give it to Sprocket on the roller skates. There were just so many good different angles, clever film work, where like they were just showing the back legs, just showing the front, implying movement with the tail going up and around the bench, doing the handstand, just great implied motion and action for what amounted to a bunch of camera tricks. Yeah,
when I saw that, I actually thought they must have had a dog butt with just the tail, because he goes off the screen.
Most
and then
definitely.
Immediately the tail comes around the other side. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what they probably did there. Interesting.
Yeah. So similar, them skating around, just a different target.
Those skates, man, they were great.
That's right. So, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
This week we got a classic episode, Elementary, Dear Data. The Enterprise is on its way to rendezvous with the USS Victory for some reason, but they get to the meeting point super early, so they have some downtime to just hang out and relax until it gets there, which is kind of fun. So Geordi decides to spend that time working on a model ship because he's a nerd. And then he convinces Data to take his love of Sherlock Holmes, and then they can go play as Sherlock Holmes and Watson on the holodeck, which sounds like fun. But Geordi quickly finds out that Data has simply memorized all the Sherlock stories, so as soon as the mystery presents itself, he just immediately solves it. And this really overwhelmingly pisses off Geordi really quickly. And he storms out because he can't have any fun if it just ends so quickly. And they argue about it in 10 Forward, and Dr. Pulaski overhears them. And she says, oh, well, Data will never just enjoy a spontaneous story or solve a new mystery because he's a machine. But Geordi and Data want to prove her wrong, so they invite her to come back with them to the holodeck for their next adventure. And when they get there, they tell the computer to make a unique Holmes-like story for Data to solve, but he once again solves it too quickly because the computer just made a mishmash of different elements from other books that Data's already read and memorized. So then Geordi asks the computer to make a completely unique Holmes mystery with an adversary capable of defeating Data. And once the program starts, Pulaski is immediately kidnapped by some unknown assailant who turns out to be the infamous Moriarty from the stories. So Data and Geordi confront him, and he apparently has way too much knowledge for a 19th century hologram. And then Data finds that he has a drawing of the Enterprise. And this really freaks them out, so they run to Picard on the bridge to figure out what they should do next. And this is when they figure out where they went wrong, because instead of asking the computer to make an adversary that could defeat Sherlock Holmes, they said it should be able to defeat Data. So the computer was like, oh, how do I do that? It starts making the hologram Moriarty way too powerful and sentient, basically. So it made like a being of its own mind. Meanwhile, Moriarty learns that he has control over the holodeck arch, and he's learning more and more from the ship's computer. And he even makes the whole ship shake from inside with a machine that he built in the hologram, in the holodeck. So Picard then feels the ship shake. He's like, I got to go meet this guy. So he goes down to meet Moriarty. And Moriarty basically doesn't seem really evil at this point. He's just pleading with Picard that he feels that he's a life form and he wants to be more than a hologram and live out in the real world. And Picard explains that this is currently impossible, but they can save his program and maybe bring him back if they ever figure out how to do it. So that way he won't die. He'll just be frozen in time, basically. And Moriarty seems okay with this, so they save him and he disappears. And the USS, whatchamacallit, shows up, and that's the end of the episode. Victory. So, Steve, what'd you think of this episode?
Okay, so some things I liked. I loved once they got into the hologram, Data just sort of telling Geordi his job was to write shit down.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cute and funny. I loved all this breaking character moments. Did Holmes really talk like that? Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
I love that the Doctor then got involved, and it really helped to further the her and Data kind of relationship that's been set up.
Yeah, I wrote that they finally humanized her a bit in this episode, for sure.
Certainly made her less just adversarial towards Data, at the very least.
She was more playful with them this time, yeah.
Yeah. I loved that we got some like real talking to the computer in this show more and more feels like I'm trying to describe shit to Chat GPT.
Yeah.
In a Holmesian style. You can't say Sherlock Holmes because there's like copy mart thing, right things there, but you can say in a Holmesian style.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the initial bits of sort of the professor becoming somewhat self-aware. But I feel like they didn't push it far enough.
Yeah. I'll get into that too.
And then I did like that once they showed Data making actual deductions and they didn't just know what the story was. I like the way they played that out. And they showed that even if Data didn't know the story, that he was still, a super genius.
Yeah, they basically proved Dr. Pulaski wrong, which I liked.
Yeah. And then Geordi finally gets to step up once Data says he can't see the murder connection. And it was great. I was like, is Geordi really going to play second fiddle
the whole time?
This whole time. And even Watson at least had those clutch moments. So it was good to see Geordi get that moment.
He would ground Holmes and bring him down.
Moriarty, I'm not going to say he was a villain because he really, really wasn't.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say that he is the most well-written and well-acted guest character I think we've had.
That's fair.
So far. He wasn't villainous, and I think they could have pushed it further, but he was still great. And then I love the discussion at the end about like consciousness versus reality, and I think therefore I am, and how philosophical they kind of got. And then how the captain has to murder him. I like that was the conclusion.
But he doesn't. He saves
I know he
him.
Didn't. No, but that was the conclusion they came to. He's well, then you have to murder me.
Oh, that's right.
Some things I struggled with a bit. The whole angle, the Doctor trying to prove that Data can't have original thought when we have like clearly seen him have original thought before this point, was kind of like, okay.
She's racist.
Yeah. This is funny. I wrote this down before they revealed that like Data knew the mystery already, so it wasn't fair. But I said, man, Data solving the strangling murder was way too quick and it felt gross. And it was like, oh, it's because he knew what it was. Yeah. Got it. So if the hologram, so this is like hologram tech. I don't know if there's a question or something I disliked. If the hologram tech is projected around them, and the room seemingly moves with under their feet in some way so that they're never leaving this like 20 by 20 room. Once they got out of a certain range, Moriarty would literally cease to exist.
Well, if you're in level 4 of Mario, level 10 still exists. It's just you're not there seeing it. It's in the computer code.
But the Doctor isn't.
That's a good point. The Doctor isn't.
So they literally could have walked out of London and gone to an open field, and eventually London would have had to have disappeared, and the Doctor would just have been in the field with them.
Or she's in a little pocket in the corner that's still materialize that they can't see because of the holograms.
Maybe.
I don't know,
that's
maybe.
where it got kind of iffy. And I don't know enough about the holotech and what the limitations are supposed to be to know if that made sense. But that felt kind of like, really?
I think they purposely don't explain too much about the holodeck because then it'll be wrong. You know, it won't work.
And then I thought that it was just too big of a suspension of disbelief that Moriarty, with zero technological knowledge outside of steam power, would be able to take over the ship's computer with such ease. And he mentioned that he could feel something outside of himself. And he had this feeling of wonder outside of what he had seen. But they never implicitly said that he had knowledge that he shouldn't have.
Well, he was drawing the Enterprise and stuff. So it was that.
But even that wasn't I know the Enterprise, I know her systems, I know how to take over the computer. That was what's his face? Richard Dreyfuss molding the mountain in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is important.
I took that as he's literally jacked in part of the computer. So he's slowly enveloping this knowledge and trying to figure it out in his 19th century brain, just figuring out things over time. So if they left him for longer, he would be getting more and more knowledgeable and understand it better. But it was taking him a while to kind of compute, basically. Right,
I guess. But if they gave him enough smarts that he was able to take over a computer system, then he would also have access to theory on whether he was real or not. The knowledge gap was odd.
It wasn't explained fully. I get that.
I didn't quite get it. Yeah. And then I like that they brought up the mortality failsafe when they brought in Picard, but Data and Geordi had literally already talked about it, but for some reason Data acted surprised.
Yeah, it was a script rewrite they didn't fix or something. They
didn't fix a rewrite, or they put a line in the wrong place. But I went, why did Data act like a dummy there?
That's fair.
And then my final note was Moriarty just didn't feel villainous enough. He was never really threatening.
Very nice to Pulaski.
There was no big Moriarty thing where Pulaski was going to be crushed by a thing of bricks being held up by a plate that they were now standing on. There wasn't any classic Moriarty shit.
I did like that they it was going somewhere good, because I liked the kind of villainous way he would say I haven't hurt her. I could. Or he's I might. It's he's these little moments where he's not being threatening. He's just no, but I could, and that was cool. But yeah, you're right. It just, the whole episode, I feel just kind of suddenly ended without him going to any place that anyone was in danger. There was no, like you said, he shook the ship a little bit, but there was no threat that they had to immediately fix. He was just oh, he seems this could get out of hand, but it never got out of hand. It just kind of ended suddenly, which is why there is a sequel episode later on down the line. I saw that he played Moriarty one other time, so I wasn't sure how that played out, but I'm glad to know there's a sequel episode. Thankfully, because people probably had the same thoughts as you, ooh, not me. I'm oh, I love Picard and him interacting is pretty badass, because they're both these great minds and two British guys going at, the minds of battle. But yeah, there's definitely more, but I think it does leave this episode kind of lacking, because we're expecting more, and there's where'd it go? But that actor, he's fantastic. I hadn't seen him in much other things, but he's really good in this part. He was on The Nanny. That was his big moneymaker. Oh, he was the butler guy. He was the butler. I forgot all about that. Oh my gosh. So yeah, that was the one that, if you look at his career, his IMDb sheet is a mile long, but most things are one episode, two episode, two episode, random movie, and then The Nanny, 128 episodes, and then one episode, those paychecks. So that was his big paycheck. Yeah, clearly been living off of. I also like this episode for it establishing, starting early on, this growing friendship between Data and Geordi, which becomes a staple of the series. They're just total nerd buddies. And this kind of shows them hanging out in their free time, doing random crap, getting into trouble, so I really like that kind of relationship, and it builds it here. So I think it's an upper middle episode for me, but it doesn't get to a higher point for the reasons you said. It just kind of, there was no big conflict that was a threat, but I don't know. Good for the other reasons, though. Does that bring us to some Trek facts? Factoids. All right. Well, Picard utters the word merde which is the French word for shit. And since it was a foreign language, it passed the TV censor. So he literally says shit in this episode, and it's okay.
Hey,
in a fun coincidence, Daniel Davis, Moriarty, the actor, later appeared in The Hunt for Red October, portraying a senior crew member on the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, which was actually exists. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
And here's a little mini segment for you guys out there. For instead of our Trek connections, we got Sherlock connections. Although this is the first time that Sherlock Holmes has been portrayed in Star Trek, there have been numerous cast members with connections to that part. Leonard Nimoy played Sherlock on stage. Christopher Plummer, who was the big Klingon captain in one of the movies, he played a part in Murder by Decree, which is another Sherlock movie. And director Nicholas Meyer, who directed the Khan movie, wrote 3 Sherlock Holmes novels, one of which was adapted to the screen in the 7% Solution in 1976. And in that film, Sherlock's brother, Mycroft, was played by Jeremy Kemp, who plays Jean-Luc Picard's brother in the episode Family later on in the series.
Holy hell.
Benedict Cumberbatch from Star Trek Into Darkness also plays Sherlock in the TV show. Star Trek veteran John Rhys-Davies, who's Indy, that guy, and also Gimli in Lord of the Rings. He played Dr. Watson in the series as well. And Marina Sirtis, Dr. Troy, appeared in the British TV series The Return of Sherlock Holmes in 1986 in the episode The Six Napoleons. So there's a lot of Trek Sherlock connections there.
Holy crap.
The original ending of this episode had Data and Picard privately realize that because Moriarty's drawing survives off the holodeck, like when they take his drawing off the holodeck, it should disappear, and it doesn't. And that there was a possibility that Moriarty himself could exist in the real world, which freaked them the hell out. So the rest of the scene would therefore have been a mere deception on Picard's part that they were going to save him, when actually they were just going to obliterate him. But no one was comfortable with that element because it didn't really fit in their characters to want to actually kill a new life form. So the whole kind of plot point was removed. But it does show that they walk off the holodeck with that drawing, and it should not exist off the holodeck, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I thought it was kind of fun. And that's our Trek facts. But what are our Trek connections, Steve?
Hold on, before we walk away from that thought.
Of course.
Okay, so the holodeck has, I'm trying to think of, because it's had multiple changes already.
Yes. It's kind of where it's going to be. But
we had the one where they were gangsters, right?
Yeah.
And a gangster wanted to escape, and he walked out and he dissolved.
Right.
But he became self-aware. So there's always that question. And then a few episodes later, there's the one where they come and improve the holodeck, and that sexy lady shows up.
Oh, yeah. For Riker.
To entice both Riker and Picard.
Yeah, that's true.
Get weird threesome vibes.
They did it later, bro.
But then something, so then if the idea here was that it was going to progress where like maybe the hologram could, so then it was like whatever those aliens did allowed this to happen.
Yeah, to get to the point where Moriarty is actually a danger. And
right.
Because the normal thing is, it just becomes important in Voyager as well, is there's the holo emitters. Inside the holodeck, there's these things that emit make the energy turn into matter, but they're only going to work while the emitters are making that happen. So when they get away from the emitters, they kind of just fall apart and turn back into energy again. And that's why there's a mobile emitter that is introduced in Voyager that a hologram can wear, and that they can walk outside the hologram because it's basically emitting them while they're outside of it. So that's never really explained in this episode, but it could have implications that for some reason it made things into a physical piece of matter that then exists outside of the holodeck, which is fascinating. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry. That was like a canon-ish kind of question.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Well, I'm excited to see more from the holodeck, even though you said at some point it kind of becomes a crutch for the show, but I'm still excited.
I will comment that I love every single holodeck episode, and I don't care about the haters who say there's too many, because there are a lot, but they're just so fun. Like, I just love seeing these characters outside in weird situations, Robin Hood and crap, it's like, it's great. So I don't mind it at all. I get more tired of the Klingon episodes, but you seem to like those so far. So maybe you'll like, there's way too many Klingon episodes in the future. So,
well, true. We have not really had that many yet, but we could get there.
Yeah, not yet. So I'm not tired of them again yet, but we'll see if it gets to that point.
Well, this week I've got some great Trek connects.
Nice.
Daniel Davis, who was the actor who played Moriarty, did a voice on the classic animated series Duckman.
Ooh, yeah, I love that show.
Also doing a voice for that show was Tim Curry, who of course played Long John Silver in Muppet Treasure Island.
Heck yeah.
He was also in The Prestige with Ma Cocaine, who played Ebenezer Scrooge in Muppet Christmas Carol. Ma Cocaine. Alan Sheeran, who's an actor who played Investigator Lestrade. He actually played Sherlock Holmes in 2 episodes of The Real Ghostbusters, that like animated show.
Oh, yeah.
Well, also in the show was Frank Welker, prolific voice actor and voice in the Muppet Babies, who also Dave Coulier, or Uncle Joey from Full House, who took over in like season 3 and 4 of Muppet Babies for most of the main characters after Howie Mandel dropped out. And Arsenio Hall, who played Winston. The Arsenio Hall show was Jim Henson's final TV interview.
Oh, look at that.
So multiple connections to Real Ghostbusters.
Weird.
And then you've got Anne Ramsey, who is an actor playing Ensign Clancy, who you see her one other time, apparently. She was in 2001 Planets of the Apes playing Lieutenant Colonel Grace Alexander. Also in Planet of the Apes was Chris Christopherson, special guest on The Muppet Show.
He was like drunk or something. I remember talking about that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it was him, Chris Christopherson. I can't remember her name.
It's like his girlfriend or his wife or whatever at the time.
They were his wife and they were a duo, but she was just way more talented than him.
Oh, yeah.
She just was.
Forgot about that.
So that's some sweet Trek connects.
And it makes sense they connect because these episodes were so similar. My gosh.
Basically.
Both involve traveling into a dangerous place to solve a mystery. The holodeck on the Star Trek episode and the Gorg Castle in Fraggle Rock.
Ooh. I said something similar. Both feature people venturing someplace dangerous, then deciding it's a smart idea to go get backup. Red and Gobo with the Gorg's Garden, then they go back and get the others, and Data and Geordi with the Alive holodeck, and they have to decide they have to go get Picard.
Totally. Both have a character realizing they might have the means to obtain forbidden knowledge. Gobo and Red with the map to the Fraggle treasure, and Moriarty figuring out the truth of his existence and the real world.
They're both basically the same caliber of things.
Of course.
Both feature someone uncovering a mystery. Data with the Holmesian drama, and Red and Gobo following the map.
That's very true. Both have characters starting off to do something they think will just be fun, but it turns out to be really dangerous. Red and Gobo following what they think will just be a fake map to treasure, but is it real? Who knows? And Geordi and Data going to the holodeck to solve fake mysteries. Absolutely
I do like that.
True. Oh, and what's that noise? Oh, God!
Transporter malfunction.
All right, it's a part of the show where we transport one character from one episode to the other and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
Well, Trek to Rock this week, I'm going to bring over Moriarty and replace Gobo. Learning about the worlds outside of his own and discovering the treasure, only to realize that the answer was inside of him all along and that he's alive
and evil. Trek to Rock, I'm going to have Data take the place of Gobo. He could easily figure out the treasure map and take down the Gorgs in the process. And he gets to sing a fun song at the end. He likes to sing, so there you go.
Rock to Trek, bring over Wembley to replace the Doctor. I just think it would be really funny to watch him be questioned by Moriarty on that couch. But he can't hold anything back and just spills the beans immediately, telling Moriarty everything.
Oh, we're on the Enterprise. Oh, it's a big ship. Oh, we're in the future.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know how many crew members there are. Let me think. There's Gobo and Boober and Moki and Gobo.
Oh, right. Just stop talking. I don't care anymore.
Oh, geez. Thanks.
Rock to Trek, I'd have Junior Gorg take the place of Moriarty, and for reasons. It would just be hilarious to have him be saying Moriarty's lines in Junior Gorg's voice. And also he would suddenly gain all the knowledge of the ship's computers, and a smart Junior Gorg would be a dangerous thing because he's huge
if he was
and dangerous.
Yeah, well, he just catches every single Fraggle that comes in.
I shall kill the Fraggles.
I could hurt you if I felt like it.
Yes, because I'm a huge Gorg.
That's right. Well, that brings, that's your line. Never mind.
That brings us to the end of episode 131 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode, Don't Cry Over Spilt Milk.
And Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Outrageous Okona.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.